As you're watching this, everything is still a work in progress. This is our first, very early part of the first alpha rollout. So you're going to see, I don't know if there's sound associated with it either. If that's going to play lightly in the background,
It
but
will lightly play in the
um,
background.
okay, cool. But you'll see things that still need polishing. So don't consider this an end product. Just consider this a showing you guys development and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of like our playground where we check out the systems that we've built and kind of play through and make sure that it's fun and see what we need to fix and see what things we need to change and, figure out what's fun and what's not. So that's some of our gathering right there that you just saw. But yeah, for sorry, that's my daughter in the background.
No, it's fine. Like that's
Um,
why I gave the preface for people. I was like, there are going to be kids, there are going to be cats, there are going to be dogs. It's.
Yeah, so this is like our hybrid combat system, kind of 2.0. That's certainly not our final iteration. There's stuff that needs to be fixed and stuff that needs to be changed. But you'll see that there's a nice mix of both tab targeting and action skills happening in these fights. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the best controls are. We haven't quite nailed it yet, but I think we're getting pretty close. So this is basically a dungeon that should be tuned for 8 players, but I think they're going through with 5 players right now. We kind of turned things down a little bit so that we don't want the whole studio playtesting at the same time every day. So we just go in with small groups and we kind of get notes and take notes and go back and fix things and that kind of stuff.
And
Yeah, and just to kind of add here, I know you guys will be noticing the effects. I mean, we have an amazing effects artist, Jim, who, just to give you guys an idea of how effects get implemented, we kind of run what are called first passes to get something in the world that can be present for these effects. And then as we kind of run through that first pass on all the skills and abilities, then we take additional time to go back and do a second pass and a third pass. And during each of those passes, they become more, closer to the final product, right? You're going to, like right now, you just saw a template that was, very, very large for a specific ability.
Super chunky.
That's very chunky, right? Or you see, some of the brightness or some of the size of the effects or some of the, templates are there. All that stuff gets refined. So keep that in mind as you're seeing stuff.
Yeah, Jim does deserve a raise. He's been doing a fantastic job. I think he's made our game look pretty incredible. So we're excited to have him, and it's been a lot of fun working with him. But yeah, so other things we've been working on, we've got sort of a rudimentary gathering and crafting system in. Again, it's pretty rudimentary, right? So it's just we're putting the skeleton together. So the first kind of foundational layout of those systems. Tracking items, tracking resources, tracking all those things in the database. That's sort of what we've got set up now. There's some really relatively simple ways of interacting with those, but you start from the bottom and you work your way up.
And for those asking if there's going to be any information about classes, yes. We have a plan to basically put out quite a few articles and video content and pieces as we move into Alpha 1. They will all be part of an Alpha 1 series that will talk about each of those things, what you can expect from Alpha 1, and the current state that they'll be in and what kind of feedback we're looking for, and then also looking to the future. So keeping that in mind, we will have some pieces coming out. We implore you, actually, if you look at the links down right below me, if you can follow us on Ashes of Creation on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, right here on Twitch, we'll be sharing a lot of cool information for you. And as we move into Alpha and as we move out of the NDA portion, we will be streaming more of that content too. So keeping that all in mind.
Yeah, and this dungeon here is actually a lower level dungeon, so this is something you'd probably tackle around like level 5 or level 10.
Right. And another thing to keep in mind about what you're seeing here is that this is actually us at level 10. So, those of you who are MMORPG veterans, there's a very limited select amount of skills that are available, at that type of level. Actually, what you're seeing here is probably more skills than you would typically have in another game, in another MMO at level 10. I mean, you see we have practically a full hotbar, if I recall correctly. Most of the MMOs I've played at level 10, you maybe have 3-4 skills tops to kind of play with from an active standpoint. But just keep in mind, the intended top level for release is level 50. So there's still a much greater way to go when it comes to the skill fidelity and interactions and synchronization that's available for players.
Yeah, and also we're just trying to establish like the core identity of these classes too. So that's why we're starting with like a sort of limited kit, just so we can kind of figure out like, okay, this feels good for the cleric. Let's make sure that like we kind of keep this going up through the levels so that we don't lose that flavor or that feeling of making a cleric feel clericy. So we do that with each class just to make sure that like, okay, these skills fit well together, or these skills, this one doesn't quite match the rest of what there's going on there, and it doesn't make sense in sort of how I play, so let's maybe take that out and give that to another class or something along those lines. So that's why we start with a small group of characters first, and then we kind of build out from there.
And there's a question here asking, does that mean that it's going to be a relatively longer process to get to level 10 than a typical MMO that we've played before?
We have a relatively long time horizon for our leveling compared to other games.
I mean, one of the things I would say with regards to like leveling times is if you were to kind of classify, I mean, for those of you out there who have a lot of MMO experience, if you were to kind of classify our leveling time to more casual or more hardcore, I would say we're towards the more hardcore leveling time, but we're not, as far as some of those very grindy games. But we're definitely not going to be a max level in under a week type game. This is something that we want, players to need to invest some time and effort into. There's going to be many different paths towards leveling. It's not going to all be housed within your adventuring class and going out and killing monsters. So in that way, obviously, many of you guys know if you've been following Ashes of Creation, our ideal is to give a lot of progression paths so that different play styles get catered to and are relevant. But the amount of time to level is something that's going to be more on the hardcore side, but not all the way.
And I'm switching over to our next little dungeon here that we played through. If you want to talk a little bit about that. There are quite a few other questions in chat regarding specifically mana and how that's going to work. Is it going to be typical as like other types of MMOs where as a cleric you're going to have to manage that resource, etc.?
Yeah, any resource that we give you is going to be something that is managed, right? If we don't want you to manage it, then we wouldn't put it in the game, right? So mana will be consequential. It won't be just a bar that you don't pay attention to. If you're a mage or you're a cleric, or even if you're a tank, right, it's a resource that you can draw on to do things to the world, and you have to be careful about how you use it.
Yeah, some of the early discussions that Jeff and I had back in 2016, I think, when we would do our 8-hour-long roundtable discussions, was the relevance of downtime. Basically, in a lot of the older MMOs that we've been accustomed to playing, you kind of mana-oriented classes run through their mana and then have to kind of like sit down
hours
to regenerate. Exactly. And, that wasn't very... I will say, at first in that discussion, I was a little bit on the side of like, yeah, but there should be a cost-benefit ratio between your effectiveness in combat and the amount of downtime that you should have. And I think Jeff maybe illuminated a little bit more to me, the idea of having, compelling gameplay that's present through a majority of your experience, and sitting is not very compelling. No. So I think we've kind of incorporated that philosophy within the core gameplay loop of mana-driven classes as well as health-driven classes, and incorporated mechanics that I think eliminate the sitting quote-unquote downtime as opposed to otherwise.
Yeah, but still make it something you have to manage, right? Like you still interact
exactly.
with that bar, and that bar is still very important to you.
We have another question that is, what is the 1+ after the enemies?
So the 1+
don't look
means...
at
that. It's there, so figure we might as well answer.
It's mostly for us to understand like the population in the world, but it means that this troll is 1 level higher than you, and it is an elite.
Right. So typically, the way that we would communicate that type of information once the UI is fully implemented would be basically the set dressing of the nameplate. So if you were to select a monster or a mob, you would notice the nameplate either would have a differing color that would illuminate you kind of to what its level position is based on yours in comparison. And then additionally, if it were an elite or a dungeon boss or a world boss, you would have additional filigree around the actual nameplate itself that would kind of designate, hey, this guy's a little bit, beefier, or this girl's a little bit beefier than your typical trash mob.
Cool. And others are asking, can I have all the skills of my class, or will I have to pick and choose one?
You will have to pick
You will have to pick and choose.
This is
We're
more
not one,
definitely
but,
like a game based on builds. So you will build your character out based on your skill tree. But you will be having
Mom's
to make
bugged out.
choices. You will, by choosing something, you're giving up something else, and that's always going to be the case in Ashes of Creation.
And then there's some other questions regarding, are there going to be hard CCs? Specifically, they're asking in regards to PvE.
Hard CCs as in
Like crowd control.
meaning like complete lockdown?
Yeah, I
there
would
will be
assume so.
absolutely hard CCs that are available, yes. But keep in mind, in my opinion, right, when you have to balance between the application of a skill in PvE versus PvP, one of the biggest components, obviously, from CC perspective is going to be mitigating returns or diminishing returns. Those are something that are going to be very prevalent, not just from a PvP perspective, but also from a PvE perspective as well.
And we've gotten this question before, but I got confused. Actually, people are wondering if they're going to be able to see targets. So in a lot of games, you can see like the target.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah, assisting, basically, as I call that, right? Assisting, being able to target off a target. That's a very important component of group-based combat, whether it be PvE or PvP. Additionally, group leaders, and they'll be able to delegate this responsibility to other party members, will be able to apply over-the-head icons to targets as well, so that they can designate essentially like, hey, this is your attack target, this is the CC target, this is the kite target, kind of that.
And I know this is the one that we've gotten a few times before. People are wondering if the max size party is going to be 5 or what is planned. Primarily just because they're seeing 5 here.
It's 8. Yeah, we've said this in the past. It is 8. That is kind of how we are designing group combat as around an 8-player party based off of our 8 different archetypes. That's our design philosophy there.
And then people are noticing that the mini-map has little blips for enemies. Are there going to be abilities or ways for people to spec to get more information on the mini-map, or will that information always be available to a user?
That's something we want to do with our utility skills. So seeing the mobs on the mini-map is probably not going to be a thing that everybody gets access to. That will probably be relegated to certain classes and certain abilities of certain classes. That's mainly just there for us to kind of figure out what our population is actually doing in the level at a glance. So it's more for us than it is for people, especially like in a dungeon like this. We don't really necessarily want to give away where all the mobs are unless you are a class that is very good at figuring out where the mobs are.
Cool. People have a lot of questions today, so I'm trying to grab them when I can see them. But is there anything else that you want to kind of share, Jeff, that you all have been working on? I know it's been a very long process. You have this huge list of things that you guys have been just pumping out. It's been really cool for us, like on the community and like marketing side, because we're getting to see all the cool stuff that we get to share with everybody. For instance, like I said, this live stream might go a little longer than an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good to start feeling stuff kind of come together, like in aggregate, right? It's not like any one given thing, although I'm pretty stoked about how the mages turned out so far. It's a really fun class to play. I think just overall, just kind of seeing where we've come has been kind of the most fulfilling part for me. We've come a very long way in a very short amount of time, and we continue to make pretty incredible strides, every couple of months. So, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting.
Yeah, I think.
Go for it. Sorry, Steve.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think one of the biggest communication points from, us as a studio to our community, obviously being appreciative of the support and, you guys giving feedback and participating in discussion on Discord, on forums, on Reddit, on different social channels. Those are all very important. Participating in our dev discussions, those are all very important. But, I think the most important aspect from us to you is our goal is to make sure that this game answers all of the promises, obviously, that we've made from a mechanic standpoint at launch. And additionally, most importantly, from a quality perspective, that our launch is something that is, above reproach, is flawless, right? You know what I mean? Like
Steven expects
I've
a
gone
lot
through
from
a
us.
lot of different. I do expect a lot, but you know what? I think that we've been able to put together an amazing team that can answer that call. One of the things for me as an MMO player that I've experienced in the past is the launch day is such an important day. I mean, especially in games that have long tail type progression and player driven mechanics. Launch day is the foundation for those things. So as we go through this Alpha 1 and as we go through Alpha 2, our goal is to make sure we get it right, and that obviously might involve additional time, but we're going to keep you a part of the process every way as we continue to develop and iterate. That's the promise we've made to the community.
Yeah.
The
MMOs
audio's
only
okay.
get one launch unless you have all the money in the world. So
Right.
we always, especially for a group that's relatively unknown, right? We're not Blizzard, we're not Activision.